Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming back. This is session 4, following the Bible study, The Purpose. Hope everybody's doing great. Just a quick summary is we started by saying, what is the purpose of a Christian? And it's to love one another. That's biblical, right? Why do we want to do that? So the people that outside of Christianity can look at us and be like, I want to be more like you. Yet what we see in the world today is the world looks at us Christians, and doesn't want to be anything like us. So we hopefully agree that we need to improve on how we're portraying Christianity so people can come to us. So we're trying to figure this out. We then talked about the Pharisees and how Jesus rebuked them. And one of his biggest thing is like, you guys break God's commands by valuing and seeking traditions. So what does that mean, like seeking and valuing traditions? My understanding is that they have taken some parts of the Bible, some of the commands, and emphasized them in certain ways that they're actually ignoring or breaking some other important commands. Not that there's some more important than others, but they're making things not what they are in the Bible. So one of the things that we're going to look on today is, do we have traditions that can be giving us the bad rap of coming across as arrogant and self-righteous and haughty and that kind of stuff? So one of the things we're gonna start with is how we, and I hope you agree, look at sin as big sin and small sin. This is a tendency that we kind of tend to follow, and we're going to look at the Bible to see the definitions of what are the big sins versus what are the smaller sins. I'm being facetious, of course. I hope you forgive me, but we are going to look at them. So we're going to use Galatians 5:13 through 21. I will encourage you to read it. This is the part where Paul is encouraging people to live by the Spirit, not by the desires of the flesh. And his argument, very strong argument, is that if you live by the only way to love your neighbor is to live by the Spirit and shed away the desire of the flesh. When I say desire of the flesh, what comes to mind? Typically, we're looking at things of sexual nature, right? So let's look at what Paul is listing. He starts that list with sexual immorality. We hopefully agree that that's a big sin, like, oh my goodness. Then he talks about jealousy, envy, self-ambition. Well, I mean, we don't consider those like sins, and if we do, it's like, oh, these are small sins. But if you look at coveting, envy and self-ambition and jealousy are generated from me. I want to be better compared to others typically. So that's a strong one, but we don't see it that way. Then he talks about hatred, discord, fits of rage. Who doesn't do that? I don't think we even consider those as sins, but in his definition, justifiably so, these are the desires of the flesh that prevents us from loving others, loving one another. And he summarized as like, love your neighbor as yourself in that passage as the law that encompasses all laws. So I hope you can see that the Bible is not pointing out big from small sin, but yet we very strongly have the tradition of valuing big sin versus small sin. Why do we focus on large sins? Things like homosexuality, abortion, for murder, and we go after it with like, we gotta get rid of these things because maybe, just maybe, it distracts us from looking at our smaller sins that are biblical, yet I don't want to really put myself into feeling that I'm sinning, like, because the less I sin, the closer I get to God. So if I just push them to the side, that's going to make me feel better about me, be an okay Christian, right? So let's also look at another thing. It's like sexual immorality is such a big word. We focus primarily on homosexuality. Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Isn't adultery sexual immorality? Isn't sex before marriage sexual immorality. So even within the sexual immorality category, we're classifying in our traditions today what to focus on and what not to focus on. A third one that we can talk about is marrying a divorced person. Jesus said, if you marry a divorced person, you're committing adultery. Not committed, you're committing adultery. So what do we view that today? I don't think anybody even thinks about it. It's like it's so pushed to the side. Jesus' words, God's commands, are completely not followed. So hopefully you can see that we are classifying sin about what it is and what is large and what is small. And a lot of the things that we don't even view as sin, things like envy, gossip, jealousy, it's like, it's not that big of a deal. Again, because we don't want to feel that we are sinning, because it makes us feel better about ourselves. But it's not our doing. In Colossians 3:8, Paul says, rid yourself, and then he lists several of what we consider little sins. In Romans 7:14 through 20, Paul says, I continue to do the things that I do not want to do. This is Paul roughly 20 years in his ministry, still saying this. And then we look at John 8:7, where Jesus confronts the people that wanted to stone the adulteress, and says, these people were the righteous Bible thumpers, how dare this woman do this? And he tells them, you with no sin, throw the first stone. And everybody walks away. So, I mean, we say that we are sinners, but we forget that we are sinners past, present, and future. We can't get rid of sin because we're human. And I'm talking about the stuff that we don't consider sin. We do it like that. Hatred, fits of rage, discord, meanness, gossip, envy. But we don't want to think of them as sin because it makes us feel bad. But that's what we're trying to get away from. We have been, by tradition, following sin type and sin frequency as our personal measure for how we're doing as Christians. And it's time to change that. To change it to what, Rada? Well, we know God erases the sin immediately. We believe that. We call that what? Grace, right? So then we have to immerse ourselves in that grace. But how can we immerse ourselves in that grace if we don't feel it daily? But wait, we have the solution. We've just discussed that we do sin daily, all those little sins that we disregard and not even consider a sin. But if we did, every time I am angry at somebody, every time that I meanly disagree with somebody, I can come between me and God and go and say, you have forgiven me out of this sin, Lord. Your grace is awesome. And then I can feel God's grace filling me, washing me completely clean, rather than depending on my limiting my sin. So hopefully we have seen today, or we're starting to accept the fact that we do follow our traditions, and it is time to break away from that and look at the substitute, which is God's grace to feel it daily. Thank you for listening. We'll see you the next session.